The first thing that you need to do is set clear expectations and have consistent consequences. The year that everything changed for me, when I really started pursuing excellence, on the back wall of my classroom, I had the phrase that I created: clear expectations, consistent consequences. And the reason why I had that there was because when I was standing in the front teaching, I wanted to be able to look in the back and remind myself that what's going to help me take things to the next level is if I remind myself to set clear expectations and to have consistent consequences. Because I realized that what I was doing when I was struggling my first year was that I was consequencing students based off of my anger and not off of their actions. So I had to set clear expectations, because if the expectation is that we're at a voice level 0, which means that we're silent, that means that everything that's not at a voice level 0 is falling short of the expectation. So whether there's a student that is whispering or there's a student that's shouting at the top of their lungs, both students are falling short of the expectation. The next tip is that you want to deal with it yourself. If we consistently call on administration to deal with our issues, what we're doing is we're strengthening the power that the administration has, and we're weakening ourselves in the view of the students. If every time we can't handle a student, we give them to administration, all that's doing is letting the student know that the administrators can deal with you and I can't. So as much as possible, try your very best to deal with the issues all by yourself. Next tip is positive narration, because you want to make the most popular activity the right activity to do. And a lot of times when we hear positive narration, we think of like kindergarten teachers like, oh, Johnny is sitting on the cart in crisscross applesauce. Look at Megan sit. It doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't. I really hate when people come with elementary solutions to a middle school problem. That's not me. That's why this video is for middle school. But you can give positive narration, which is just naming the behavior that you want to see and calling out somebody who's doing it the right way, and just letting that be heard throughout the atmosphere so students hear it and recognize, oh yes, this is the expectation. That's what I should be doing. The next tip is call and response. If you need your class to get silent right away, that's not time for just yelling like, hey, sit down, be quiet, or I'm waiting. Like it's not time for that. If you need them to get silent right away, you need to have a procedure that gets students silent in their attention right away. I love call and response. So my calls and responses will always be like, when I say dream, you say big, dream, big, dream, big. When I say work, you say hard. When I say live, you say right. When I say don't, you say quit. Not all of those in succession, but I would vary those throughout the day. And when you're doing your calls and responses, I want you to make sure that you practice them, because you want students to know that when I use this phrase, when I make this call and response, your job is to respond, to get silent, and to focus in on me. Okay, now these last few tips are more preventative measures. If you put these things in place, you would have less need to use the tips that I gave earlier, because students will be talking in your classroom less. What you want to make sure of is that you have a short, engaging lesson. In middle school, no more than 15 minutes, right? Because you have to understand the attention span and the ability for your students to sit and listen. That's not going to be more than 15 minutes. And I even think 15 minutes is stretching it. So your direct instruction should not take more than 15 minutes. I love the phrase, be brief, be bright, be fun, be done. And I suggest another tip, even chunking within that 15 minutes. I love the 4-to-1 teacher talk to student talk ratio. So over a 5-minute block, you would be speaking for 4 minutes, and then you have 30 seconds to a minute for students to reflect over what has taken place in that 4 minutes. So over a 5-minute block, you're teaching for the first 4 minutes, and whatever point you get to, stop, allow students to turn and talk, or stop and jot, or ask a question, whatever it is, for 30 seconds about what just took place over the last 4 minutes. Now I can get into the next 4-minute chunk. So in your 15-minute mini lesson, if you're going all the way up to 15 minutes, there should be 3 points in which you stop and allow students to reflect along the way. They can, again, this gives them opportunity to talk, this gives them opportunity to reflect, and it really helps with retaining the information. The next tip is to always have something to do, because when they don't have something to do, they'll find something to do. And that's typically not the same thing you want them to do, right? And disinterest leads to disruption. So always have something for students to do, not just what is on the board, but what if they finish early? What if that's too hard for them? Ask yourself these questions. Every student should always have something to do for the duration of the time that they're in your class. And another preventative tip is to have constant communications with parents. But if you are afraid to talk to parents, or you just want to make sure that you're talking to parents in an effective way, I recorded a video about that, how to effectively communicate with parents.